Hi everybody, this is Guy Games, and welcome back to War Thunder. And today I'll be doing a little bit of a comparison video between War Thunder and World of Tanks, but also a video on how to get started in War Thunder if you're playing World of Tanks already, or if you're actually entirely new from the game, and just have a bit of an easier time, so you have a lower chance in getting noob stomped, and a higher chance of actually enjoying the game. So first up, I need to clarify something. I'll be only talking about the tanks in this game. I will not really be talking a lot about aviation or fleet. So this game actually has both boats, planes, and tanks. It even has some helicopters at high tier, but since you're getting started, you don't really have to worry about those. They only get started all the way when you're hitting top tier. And everything I'll be saying is mostly going to be involving about tier 1 and tier 2. Generally, you are spending your first week in tier 1, then your first month in tier 2, and then onwards you start on tier 3 and onwards. Once you hit tier 3, you got a basic knowledge about the game, what you're doing, and you basically can expand from there. However, we got a lot of options. You got, of course, the United States of America, Nazi Germany. We got the Soviet Union and Russia after that. Then we got Britain, Japan, Italy, and France. And I have to very much clarify, if you're starting out, don't go with any of the last four. Always start with the USSR, Germany, or the USA. At least play until halfway tier 2, and preferably halfway tier 3 before you start tackling one of these four trees. You can progress with every tree at the same time, that's no problem. You can get all of them, all the tanks if you want, that's not, again no problem. But there are some challenges with these four trees that you do not have with the first trees, because the USA, Germany, and Russian trees have the highest amount of tanks, so they have the least amount of issues, because some tanks simply have weak spots and weaknesses that can be compensated by other tanks in the tech tree of these three, but those compensating vehicles are not present in the four trees right here. Another thing that I have to clarify, that even though I'll be talking very little about aviation is still a pretty important thing in the ground battles in War Thunder, because in War Thunder it is actually a mixed battle in that you can fight both planes and tanks at the same time in this mode. So, taking you got your tank, at some point you die, and you grab yourself one of these planes. And let's take one of the more popular examples, the P-47 D-25 Thunderbolt. So, if you have everything equipped with this thing, it's a fighter plane with 8 12.7 millimeter Browning machine guns, but you can carry quite a bit of under the wing. You can start out with a 500-pound bomb. Doesn't do a lot, I guess, but you can kill an actual tank with it if you're accurate. You can otherwise bring 2,000-pound bombs, but you can also bring both at the same time. And at that point, you're already talking about 2, 3 potential kills. And then they also add rockets into the mix, and you're easily looking about 4 or 5 kills with the single plane. And because of that, aircraft vehicles such as this motor carriage are actually a thing in this game. And this one is mounted with 4 of those set earlier mentioned 12.7 millimeter heavy machine guns. And these heavy machine guns are mainly going to be a trait of, for example, the USA line. Germany's are tech tree is more fan of the 20 millimeter guns, and in that way you can actually see some differences and uniqueness between all the different tech trees. And again, that's actually where these four fall short, and that's why you should start out with these three. So starting out, I'm gonna cover a little bit about the different vehicle types. So you got light tanks. They cost the lowest amount of spawn points to spawn, which is relevant in the realistic battle mode, in that you basically get a score, and based on that score, that decides how many times you can respawn in this mode. Light tanks cause a very little amount of spawn points, so you have a higher chance that you can respawn multiple times if you're using light tanks. They have high speed. Generally, they have decent firepower, but they lack in armor or in penetration of the gun, so you generally have to flank around. Medium tanks are all-rounders. They can do pretty much anything, and they also have the average spawn cost. Heavy tanks have the higher spawn cost among all of the tanks. Like all the tank types, heavy tanks have the highest spawn cost. They have the heaviest armor, of course, but they are pretty slow. Their guns are powerful, but reload very slowly, and they can get flanked pretty easily, which is actually a pretty important deal. They have tank destroyers, and the USA tank destroyers are a very odd bunch, which mainly are light, fast vehicles until you get all the way up to the Doom Turtle. But mainly, you're going to be looking at either very light vehicles, such as this Martyr, which is an absolute glass cannon with only very thin armor, and even some gaps and even openings in the armor because the actual crew is in the behind here. And why the crew is behind and why it's relevant is something I will go into in a second. But you can also find some heavy tank destroyers on the other side here of this line. So you can have both heavy tank destroyers and light tank destroyers, but a generally consensus between all of them is that tank destroyers do not have a turret. They are powerful for the tier, but they're very, very vulnerable for flanking. Now, lastly, of course, we do have those anti-air vehicles. They are SPA, which stands for self-propelled anti-air. And generally, they have very little armor. They have rapid-fire guns that are pretty weak, but some of them can actually attack ground forces, such as this Whirlwind, which actually comes equipped with a 64mm penetration round, which is actually decent for its tier, but simply because it's such a rapid-fire gun with four 20mm autocannons, it can actually wreak havoc. So that's actually something to look out for once you actually start playing. And there are some other tanks that are actually pretty notorious. Panzer IV F2, the Puma. We also have some armored cars in this game, but only a few. And that said, we're gonna go into another thing that's gonna be setting this game apart from uh, World of Tanks and other tank games. First up, of course, we have the armor system. Because what is a tank game if you do not have armor? So this here is a fully rolled armored hull, and it's 25 millimeters thick, and right here is 0 degrees angled. So by default, if you're looking at it, it only has 25 millimeter thickness. But if you start angling it, it can get up to 5 times as thick in effective thickness. Furthermore, if you're angled at a far enough position, it can actually glance off shots. And I'm going to use this Panzer IV for that example. Gonna grab this protection analysis system to simulate shots. So here you can see a shot going in, works fine, and here it still goes in, but right here it actually ricochets off already. And right here also ricochets off, and you're starting to get some issues. Non-penetration shots, not gonna go through here, and that's a very small likelihood of actually going through. Right here it actually does go through, but after it penetrates, it actually hits an auxiliary armor part actually behind it, and that actually breaks me to go into the second important thing. Because especially with World of Tanks, you all know the hit point system. You just hit a tank often enough, even if you do very little damage, you can kill it. If you can not penetrate a tank in War Thunder, there is very little you can do other than disable its gun and tracks. And you do that by actually hitting the specific part. In this case, you got the barrel right here sticking out, and you can disable the gun by hitting the barrel or hitting the cannon breech. And you can disable the engine by hitting the engine, hitting the transmission, or taking out one of the tracks. You can also put the tank on fire by hitting the fuel tank or ammo, engine, or some transmissions Some transmissions are able to catch fire, some other transmissions do not catch fire. It depends on the tank whether it actually realistically would get on fire when the transmission would hurt. And of course, we do have ammo detonations in this game, but one of the most notorious ways of killing tanks in this game is by killing crew. So this Panzer II has 3 crew. It has a commander that also functions as a gunner. It has a loader, and it has a driver. Furthermore, the loader also mans the radio station, so it actually also is the radio operator. A tank needs at least 2 crew members to operate. So in this case, it will need the gunner, commander, and the driver. You can lose the loader, and you can lose any of these two, and then this little hands in the back will actually crawl back up and replace one of these two. But once you lose 2 hands, your tank explodes, and you're dead. And depending on the amount of crew, a very notorious one is gonna be the M3 Lee at low tier. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crew members, meaning that you can lose 4 of these 6 Johnnies and Timmies before your tank dies. However, this thing actually has 2 guns, meaning that if you would lose enough crew members that you only have 2 left, you would only have, I think, only have this gunner and this driver, and you will not be able to use this 37mm gun up top because its gunner is no longer there. And with some other features you have that as well. For example, some commanders also operate roof-mounted machine guns. If your commander dies, you can no longer use a roof-mounted machine gun. In a similar fashion, if your driver gets knocked out, you cannot move for a few seconds until he is replaced. Same goes with the gunner, you cannot fire and also not aim the gun. So very important, if your gunner is knocked out, you cannot operate your gun at all. If your loader is taken out while you are reloading, you will start to reload from scratch, and your gunner will actually be reloading the gun, and it will be slower. If you just end up losing the loader at some point, it will just reload slower because, well, your gunner is gonna be reloading, and he is not as good as little Timmy in the back here. And as such, you can also explode the tank by hitting the ammo, but that is dependent on the ammo size and with what kind of projectile you hit it with. Solid shot ammo will not do nearly as much damage and has nearly like a very small chance of actually having ammo explode compared to explosive shot. Lastly, you can put the tank on fire, but tanks can have 2 fire extinguishers, and those are free, but you do have to unlock the modification after you unlock the tank, so you have to play a little bit with it before you can actually do that. Also, for repairing the tank if it gets damaged, you first need to play a few matches before you can actually start doing that. And that's actually one of the downsides of this game. You really need at least these 2 modifications on every tank. The parts and FPE are must have, and some ammunition types are locked behind upgrades, but your tank will not function drastically different because you cannot swap out different guns or upgrade the guns or anything. If you want to have an upgraded gun, you actually have to research the better tank. For example, the M4A 176 or the 75 variants of the Sherman tanks are 2 different vehicles. Anyways, turning it on fire for the 3rd time will kill the tank, but it will be done by damage over time to all the modules inside. And crew is also module, so you'll actually die by crew death, but it is because of the fire that actually kills your crew instead of a projectile that killed the crew. And now we're gonna go into the second most important thing in why you shouldn't pick these. So if you look at the tech tree here, you are 5 wide, 5 wide, and 5 wide. Here we have 4 wide, 4 wide, 4 wide, and 5 wide again. So the important thing here to notice is the amount of vehicles in the tree. So it's about 3, 5, 7, Let's say 14, 21, 28, 30, 32, 33, 5, 6, 7. About 40 vehicles are in this sector. Compared to USA, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 29, 32, 35, 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, 45, 47, 49, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58. Yeah, 58. Let's just round it to 60. So it has a full 20 vehicles more than France has. And probably even like Italy probably only has 30. Japan also has around 30. Britain does have quite a few, but with Britain, it's going to be a different case in why you do not want to pick these. So, Japan, Italy, and France simply have a very small choice between tanks, and a lot of them aren't very good, especially these starter reserve tanks, such as the H-39. They're really just not very good tanks. H-35, MCX-36, they're not good tanks. So, if you're getting started, start with one of these two, and then start with the other ones onwards after you hit around tier 3. With Britain, is going to be again another issue. Britain's tanks. Let's take this Cromwell. That is actually just the wrong Cromwell. I want to have this one. It has 75mm gun, and it only brings armor piercing to the table. So at 3.0, you have this M72 shots with 90mm or this M61 shot with 105mm. But these are merely AP and APCBC shells. You can look at the damaging effect that you see like shrapnel coming off. That means it's a solid shot. And if you go to protection analysis, and let's just dish a shell into here, you can see how you see kind of like a shotgun pattern when you actually hit a tank with it, but it means that if you hit the top right here, you can really only hit that commander and gunner, while on this side you'll actually hit the loader. And this means you have to be very specific in where you hit. And getting started is actually going to be very hard in knowing where to hit exactly while you are in a battle. So that's why I very much do not recommend starting out with Britain's tanks. Let's take a comparison. This Panzer IV F1. Let's put in a preview and check the modifications. Here we got a 51mm penetration shell, also 75mm, so very little penetration, only half of that APC shell. However, if we put this to the production analysis, and even though we can not reliably penetrate ourselves from the front, we're just gonna try it because half the time it will actually go through. And here, boom, you saw it explode outwards, and that's what you have with explosive filler shells. And these are the secret sauce of this game. So you can see the damage effect is a red explosion, and if you actually read the stat card, you have the explosive mass, and in this case, it's FPO2 and MP10, 80 grams. That's a bit confusing. It should have a TNT equivalent. If it's not TNT itself, it has a TNT equivalent. Let's check if we can actually find one that has the TNT equivalent thing. Here it has TNT. Oh, it actually uses TNT. Anyways, it has the explosive mass here, and that's basically the value that you have to keep up. And that explosive mass is the one that tells you how explosive the shot is. And anything above 50 grams really will nuke a vehicle. It will critically damage anything if it hits. If you hit the hull, it will take out anything in the hull. If you hit the turret, it will take out pretty much anything in the turret. And it is very important for you to balance penetration between and the explosion power. This gets even more so with rounds like the APCR rounds. Look at this shot. It's only 76mm, but this is a 221mm penetrating shot. When I actually first started out, I would like, oh, 200 millimeters of penetration must be the best shot ever. But if I do protection analysis here and actually just grab that one tank from earlier, it's rank 3, I'm 18, and here it is. I can shoot, sure, and I can actually tank out the tank right here. But if I shoot right here, look, I don't even kill the little fella that is sitting over there. And actually, shooting at right at this line. Now let me grab this solid shot here. And if I put it right at the same spot, I will kill both the loader and that gunner commander because the shrapnel is still moving in a cone that's around this size. The APCR basically is a laser pointer, and you can use them to deal with very heavy tanks, and you'll generally carry a few of them along with you, but you should never use ammo like this as your mainstay because, well, here goes a crew. That's one shot, and you're gonna need at least two shots to take out this little fella. Well, if you would have loaded your M62 shell and shot him in the side, he would have. Actually, this is actually a armor thin enough to actually not hit the shell sensitivity. Here we go. Boom, one shot, and in that case, he's gone. And this actually was actually a bad case in the side. Sorry about that. But one shot here, boom, he's gone. But if you do not shot properly with this M93 shot, you basically have to play tag and whack-a-mole in hitting hitting the crew members, and that's just not doable, especially if you are using a heavier tank, such as, for example, a Tiger. A full 10-second reload time is just not doable if you want to um, kill crew quickly. I mean, sure you can bring that Panzer Grenade 40-43 round, almost 300 millimeter pen, but it doesn't have that 64 grams of explosive mass that this 230 millimeter round APCBC shell has. So you're trading 40 millimeter of armor penetration for a lot of killing power. And then you just have to like ask yourself, okay, what's the thickest armor protection that I'm gonna face with this Tiger 2H? Is it gonna be more than 230 millimeters or less? And most of the time, it's gonna be less. There are very few cases that have more armor, and in that case, just having a few backup rounds, just retreating, reloading the different shell into the chamber, actually generally does the job then. But in the meanwhile, you're gonna enjoy the higher killing power of the more explosive shot. Lastly, there are a few exceptions to this rule, especially at low tier. The Panzer IIs have and other German tanks do come with 20 millimeter autocannons. And in that case, you do want to have that high penetration round, because that's actually here the Panzer Grenade 40, the 64 millimeter high velocity armor piercing tracer shell. And because you shoot so rapid fire, you can just strafe the entire vehicle and just go through the armor and just strafe the crew down. Just one here, boom, boom, two shots with a 280 shots per minute. That's 3-4 shots per second. You can actually take out crew really fast. Other examples that have different kind of shells are some of the German early medium tanks with the Panzer IV. And here's got to be a more unique shell, the heat round. And I'm gonna load up a Panzer IV, take production analysis. And this is another secret sauce thing, pretty much. This one only has the 80 millimeters, but it has a very high amount of armor penetration for what it does, and the explosive like shotgun effect is still decent. Like it has slightly less penetration explosive effect than a armor piercing solid shot round, but these rounds go through anything pretty much. Heat rounds, they like are the golden standard between the high velocity rounds and the solid armor piercing rounds. And generally they're the best round available to you up until very higher tiers. Again, do take note of what kind of shell you're using. For example, do not load an high explosive shell ever, except in guns that are at a bore diameter of over 120 millimeters. At 120 millimeters and above, your explosive shell actually gets some decent penetration, and in that case, it can actually find some gaps in the armor and do damage. But other than that, high explosive shells will do basically nothing. Even this roof armor is 10 millimeter, which is actually enough to stop this own AHE shell for most of the time. And here, 11 millimeters will also stop it. 20 millimeters will especially stop it. So there's nothing you can much you can do then. And that covers the most of the basics. So Germany gets a very light tank destroyer line, Panzer III line right here, a Panzer IV line, anti-air, and then a Stuk line on the right. USSR gets ATR to the right, first light, and then progressively heavier tank destroyers on the second right here. Then first you get some light tanks and then some very light tank destroyers here in the middle, which then later on go into these infantry fighting vehicles, such as the BMPs, Object 906. Then we got our heavy tank line that first starts with the T-28. Then we go into the pretty famous KV-1s, which are very, very good, by the way. And you also, of course, get that KV-2, which is absolutely great. And then the piece of resistance, the T-34s, T-34-85s, T-44s, T-34-100 even. That's a very, very secret Stalinian project, comrade. Anyways, then of course, here we got the light tanks on the American branch. Then we got the medium Shermans, heavy jumbos, and M6A1, and some special kind of stuff. AA. And then we got our uh, Hellcat, Wolverine, and some other tank destroyers here. And generally, as an advice, I actually suggest for if you start out with the US, get some stewards first, and you actually will need to get 4 vehicles in tier 1. So I actually heavily suggest getting the M3 steward, and then getting the M2 medium tank, so that's 2. Then the M13 multiple gun mortar carriers, and then the M22 Locust. That allows you to unlock these 4 vehicles, because you can see the line here. You need to own the M13 multiple gun mortar carriage in order to unlock the M16 multiple gun motor carriers. And other than that, you can actually play with any tank you want in order to receive that unlock. So you do not have to play with the M13 to unlock the M16, such as you have to do in World of Tanks, where you are forced to play with a specific tank to unlock the next tank. You are not forced to do so. You can actually use this reserve M2A4 to research this M1A1 Abrams. That is not a problem. Also, the little glitchiness here is actually not by the game. That's actually because I actually tampered with the files a little bit. And so that's no problem. You just get a penalty bonus at your research speed. But you can do it. It's not a problem. And there are some other sneaky ways. There are some other sneaky ways to increase your research speed. But that's going to be a little bit too deep for this video, so I don't really gonna start into that. I don't really want to go into a battle either. I just want to give you as much info on the garage as possible. So if you hit these 4, well, just progress down these lines. Really, you need 6 vehicles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or actually, I would actually go for the M16, go for M3 Lee, Stewart, M4, M10, and then probably these 2 actually, because the M4A3 105 is actually a pretty juicy tank. And from there on, just go do whatever you want. As that with Germany, I actually already unlocked this 3, but vehicles that I can definitely recommend are the Panzer IV line, the this guy, what's Squeezy Boy is the nickname. Sturmpanzer 2, which is a ridiculous mini KV2, 150mm gun. As mentioned, once you hit the big enough gun, high explosive starts doing real damage. You also got a 185mm heat shell, which is absolutely nuts. But anyways, another thing which I really like is the Stuk A. It's a hidden gem for me. 4.3 second reload, 100mm pen heat round, beautiful. Then we actually recommend getting the Panzer 4 Ausführung F2, which is also a really good tank, and then you guys start getting into the Panzer 3 line, and also guys working on down this line because it is one big line all the way from here all the way down here. So you have to unlock all of them. Really, same with this line. If you want to, well, actually, this one is connected, but once you start at the Hetzer, you have to go through all the way to the Yaktire. And some of there are quite a long line. Sometimes lever 2A5 starts with the Panzer 4. It's kind of the same thing here. But this is actually the Panzer 4 F2 is one of the best tanks at its tier. And then with the USSR, you're basically gonna be looking at your KV1s. Every single KV1 is good. Every single one of them. And that's simply because they have a very good amount of armor. The gun is decent, mobility is decent, but with the armor, you're gonna be feeling very, very well protected. You can do whatever you want to start out with, really. BT7 is really fast, really fun to play, and you basically need so 1, 2, 3, and then you can go do whatever one you want to get for these to actually start getting your way down these two lines. If you do want to actually like invest into the game, I suggest waiting until you played at least until tier 2, towards the end of tier 2 of at least one faction, and played at least matches with every single faction a little bit, so you know which ones you like and which ones you don't like before you actually start making a choice between what kind of vehicle you want to buy, because these do actually give you some advantages in researching. And that's basically the monetization model of this game, is pay to progress faster. Anyways, I think that's actually most of it. I do have to point out that actually with tanks, you actually have these crew slots. So once you research a tank by playing, you amass research points. Those got put into your tank. Then you buy it using the Silver Lion's mint currency. So you can see that, and the Golden Eagles is the premium currency. It literally says so on the box here. So with the mint currency, you'll buy your tank. Then you must train your crew to man that tank. And these are basically respawns. You can use all of these once. So no matter how good you do, you can respawn only 5 times maximum with a crew of with 5 different crews. I can only respawn 2 times with these two. And if I want to get more crew, the first one is gonna cost you 5,000 golden eagles. Actually silver lions, sorry. Second one's 10,000, and the third one is gonna be 50,000, which is a little bit too much for me. So for now, so I'm not gonna purchase it. But after that, it's gonna start costing you golden eagles. And if you actually have leftover golden eagles, this is actually a pretty good way to get like one of the good investments I actually say is either getting yourself a cheap premium or consider getting yourself a single crew slot. Crews also do have a crew level, and with that you can improve them in a marginal way uh, at first, but very experienced crew will perform better than base crew. Again, something for another time. This is gonna be a little bit too much for you guys right now, but that's that. Very much hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Hope you got something out of it, and yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.